You're listening to the Youngpreneurs Podcast, the number one resource online for under 35-year-olds, where we chat twice a week to the most inspiring entrepreneurs in the world. We have it all. If you're looking for inspiration, guidance, or actionable tips to help you transition from that job into a business, or if you're ready to take that business to a whole new level, then this is the place to be. Get ready to live life on your own terms. Youngpreneurs, welcome to another episode of the Youngpreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, Victor Ahipenny. As always, thank you for being with us. You could be anywhere right now and you chose to be here. And you're the sum of the five people that you surround yourself with. And today you've got me and our guest, Patrick Campbell, who is the founder of ProfitWell, which we're going to delve into what exactly ProfitWell is and yeah, I guess how it all came about. But first off, welcome to the show, Patrick.
Yeah, good to be here. Excited to jam.
Man, give us I love to kind of break down. We've got a lot of entrepreneurs just starting out on their journey, and I love breaking down some of the barriers that the bullshit that we put up in front of ourselves. To say, oh, I can't do it because I haven't got A, B, or C. So how was entrepreneurship always on the cards for you? Was it like, you're growing up and you had a monopoly of lemonade stands or anything like that?
So I think every entrepreneur tries to connect the dots when they go back, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I remember when I had that little business, right? I actually didn't. I was entrepreneurial my entire life, but I never wanted to go into business. My mom, when I was like, "Oh, what about business?" My mom was like, "Oh, business people are a dime a dozen. Like, don't go into business." So I actually wanted to be a cardiovascular surgeon. Like in kindergarten, I wrote that down. I don't know if I knew what that was, but I saw it on some show or something, and I wanted to be a surgeon. But I did have some entrepreneurial traits. Like I remember. So my parents are both working parents, and times were pretty tough most of the childhood. And what was kind of interesting is we had to make our own lunches even when we were pretty young, and I was pretty lazy as a kid, and so I ended up taking just a giant bag of animal crackers to school every day, and I would trade 10 to 15 animal crackers in a little market for basically getting a lunch, like a half sandwich here, a half sandwich there, a pudding, that kind of thing. But that's kind of, and there was always stuff like that. Like I had a little recycling business, I had lemonade stand, all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't something that I was like, oh, this is my DNA that I'm gonna go be a businessman.
It's funny how it's like you were too lazy to make your lunch of 2 minutes making, but you'd go to school and then hustle away to.
Yeah, man. Well, because my parents would never, even when I made the lunch, they would never buy the cool stuff. They were always buying apples, right? And I was like, oh, I want that sugary thing, that the other kids have. And so, yeah, I had my currency of my little animal cracker market.
Cool. So fast forward to school finishing and the animal cracker business being hung up. Well, I hope so. I hope you're not
still going. It's still going strong across the world now.
I'm rolling into work and being going, hey team, who's got some good treats? How did you get from finishing school to starting ProfitWell?
Yeah, so frankly, I decided I didn't want to be a surgeon when I was in high school, and I shadowed a doctor and realized it wasn't that I didn't like blood, but I didn't like they were doing a catheter in some guy's heart, and I was witnessing it, and I was like, oh, too much, can't handle it. And so all of a sudden I wanted to be a lawyer, coming from a working class, poor family, those are the jobs, right? You want to be a doctor. My dad to this day still wants me to be a doctor, even though we've had success and things like that. So then I wanted to be a lawyer, but I wasn't in love with it. It just was like, hey, let's do this. So I was taking the LSAT and things like that, which is in the States, it's the entrance exam for law school after university. And I ended up just applying. I remember I applied to 80 different companies because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I just went trophy hunting, I like to call it, where you're just like, let's see who comes back. And I ended up working for the U.S. government, actually in the Intel community. So I worked in D.C. for a little while, and that was a lot of fun because it kind of combined my love of kind of government and society, along with my love of like hard problems, and in terms of being an Intel analyst. And so that was kind of the leaping off point where I was like, I don't want to be a lawyer, but then I want to be, I want to work in government, and that's what started. And then I actually ended up going to Google because I was working on econ modeling. And then, I mean, finally, I was like, oh, if I'm going to bust my ass, I should, bust it for myself, if that makes sense. And that's what kind of led to starting, Price Intelligently, and now ProfitWell 6 years ago.
It's quite funny because it's like a lot of people will be the 13-year-old saying, I want to work for Google. These days, like, I want to work for Google, I want to work for Facebook, I want to, whatever it is. It's like, sounds like it was more fortuitous in your journey, more so than like, obviously as you get a job, you want to go for the bigger fish generally, but wasn't like it was throughout university you're going, I want to be headhunted by Google and eventually work there. What was it like pull back the curtain?
It's Disneyland for adults. I mean, it really is. It's basically, they pay you really well for not doing that hard of work. So you work hard, don't get me wrong, but it's if you're not an engineer, you're jumping into basically a sales role of some sort. So I was in sales, and then I was in sales operations, doing econ modeling and things like that. And it basically, I mean, you get everything. There's so many perks. It's great. They treat you really, really well. And that's what gives you this weird feeling when you're not happy. Like, how can I not be happy when I'm literally at Disneyland every day? And I think that for me, it was actually, I worked on a project that made, Google, a good amount of money. And I got this award for, basically it was this, it was like a loose like International Innovators Award. It had a really fancy name. And I started realizing that, and it's not entirely true, but it was true for me, that basically they're trying to keep you happy with perks, and they're basically having you on a golden treadmill because you're doing work for them in order to build the future, which is amazing. Don't get me wrong, but I had that feeling where they were going to shut my project down essentially because there was another project that was, worth more essentially. And it was one of those things where I looked at it and I was like, well, I'm a really hard worker, and I don't want to work really hard at something that I'm not passionate about, because I'm going to work hard either way. And that's what led me to basically the moment of, screw it. I'm gonna go do this myself. And, if I fail, I can always get another job. I could probably get another job at Google. Because once you're kind of in, there's a little bit of a revolving door, but, it was great. It wasn't for me at that point in my life. I would love to retire there. But that's a little ways.
And, run me through the first business. What was that? What did you say that was?
Yeah, so it's actually the same business. It's a little weird, but we started the company as Price Intelligently, and it was exclusively, it still is exclusively focused on helping software and subscription companies with their pricing. So using data and using the right data to basically suggest what your pricing should be, and in building out your pricing strategy. And over time, and this is like the quick version, which we can go deep into, we then built ProfitWell, which is free subscription financial metrics that plugs right into your billing system. And we've basically carved out this world where our whole mission is to help subscription or recurring revenue businesses make more money. And the way that we do that is we give away a free analytics tool that shows you your insights and gives you a bunch of information, but also shows you where you're not doing well. And then if you want our help to fix those things, you buy Price Intelligently, or you buy Retain, or you buy a couple of other products. And so it's a little complicated. We're still trying to figure out the messaging, because basically we've gone from just selling this pricing product to now having kind of a suite. But we'll probably figure that out in the next couple of quarters, hopefully.
And how long's this all been going on now?
So we've been around for 6 years. We're fully bootstrapped, so that's kind of a cool thing, meaning we haven't raised any money. We're completely customer funded. We're about 50 people now, though. So I know some people you interview, it's, solo, kind of
Yeah.
preneurs and things like that. But I don't know. I only can find my friends at work. That's probably sad. But I don't know if I could.
It's the animal crackers, man.
It's the animal crackers, man. I got to trade. I got to get people involved, right? Yeah, but that's kind of. I mean, that's. I mean, I don't think I don't think I even thought of being solo versus not. But I think now that I look back, I don't know if I could do the solo game. Maybe we'll see.
And with you're basically like a SaaS product for SaaS products.
Yeah, it's very meta.
And what's like looking at that? Because I want to delve into kind of the aspects of having a team of 50, but I want to just delve into the business of it a bit more. What do you find for SaaS products? Is there a secret source that the ones that say that do well? I realize they're all obviously in different metrics. Is there ones that do it well from, say, like the freemium to the the lower price to that kind of perfect mid price to the enterprise price? Is there ones that do it particularly well, and I guess insights into that?
Yeah, so you're talking about the industry, right? Like when we look at SaaS companies, are there certain types of SaaS companies that do better than others? What's interesting? It's the answer to it is a little cliche, but the subscription and the recurring revenue SaaS companies that do really well are the ones that frankly know themselves. And what I mean by that is if I'm not a guy who is going to start a business that is probably going to be a mass consumer business. I know nothing about it. I probably just don't have the instincts for it, right? And when you see a business that does well and you really get to the root of it, it's typically someone or a group of people who have the right set of skills and the right set of mindset to succeed in that space. So we're really good at, mid-market and the lower end of enterprise sales. And that's why we probably could sell a $50 a month product. And we do have people paying us $50 for some of our products who are on the smaller side. But for the most part, our target is those mid-level and on-up folks. And so that's a big indicator. And there's a bunch of other things like the ones who use things like value metrics, and there's some tactical pieces I could get into, but really it's less about one that's more successful than other, and it's more of having that founder kind of target fit that really indicates a company that's doing well versus not.
And do you find, are there particular like growth strategies that they use over one or the other? Like, is there for I guess like in SaaS products, and I'm this is far from a thing that I know lots about, but I mean I imagine the burn rate or the churn rate, sorry, is fairly high in some of them. So you I guess those metrics or those finances that you're trying to give, or is it more just making sure you're targeting the right market and then your churn rates not quite?
Yeah, I think you nailed it with the comment about targeting the right market. So what's really fascinating about there's this alignment, and I already started talking about it where it's like founder and then target fit, but there's also kind of persona or target customer fit. And what I mean by that in particular is that your target customers, we sometimes try to brute force our target customers, meaning we as companies sometimes try to sell to a customer that just isn't the right fit because they're not willing to pay as much. They don't really value the things that you're selling. And oftentimes we as founders and we as business folks aren't doing the research to understand that. So we get it in our heads. We get this idea like, oh, I really like music. I'm going to start a music app. Like, let's say we're starting Spotify today, right? Well, we get that in our head, and we're really trying to sell to people who like classical music. Like, we're the Spotify for classical music. Well, it might turn out that because a lot of that music's open source, and it's not that there aren't classical music fans out there, but none of the classical music fans are willing to pay $10 a month for the software or the product, right? Well, as a founder, we should look at that and we should go, great, we're either going to pivot meaning we're going to, change the business and try to sell something else to these classical music people, or we're going to give up on the classical music people and we're going to go find someone else who's willing to pay for hip hop or something like that, right? And I think too many of us try to force something that just really isn't there. And depending on that DNA that I was talking about, you might want to, well, I really know how to acquire classical music people, so I'm going to go find the product that works with them. Or you might be like, hey, I'm really good at building, the hip hop music app, so I have to go find that audience, right? And that's the very definition of finding product market fit or market product fit. Is that having that alignment. And sometimes you start with the market and find the product, and other times you start with the product and find the market. And I would say the most successful companies, at least this day, are actually starting with the market, because those are the people who are paying, right? And not enough for us are doing that research. So that's the big thing. I think I got off the point, but that's something that's pretty big.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot of, from like having spoken to obviously hundreds of different people, it's that point where a huge majority of them aren't doing what they started off doing. And I think a lot of people, when they are starting off, they've got these dreams and grandeur of like, this is what I'm going to do. Like, and
it's going to be amazing.
Yeah. And then it turns to, like you're saying, shoving it down their throats, or like, trying to put a square peg in a round hole, and it doesn't work because, and then it's the ones that have, had the turmoil for a couple of years trying to do that, and they go, oh, but what if I, instead of doing it to solopreneurs, I go and do it to corporates? They've got money and it's a better fit for them, and but I was doing that in corporates anyway. And anyway, I think the moral of the story is be open to pivoting, but also make sure you give things a good shot on the other side of things. Some people just jump ship because it gets difficult more so than it doesn't work. But how have you, has it just been you that bootstrapped it from the start, or is there a couple of you?
Yeah, it's a little complicated. I do have two co-founders technically. They weren't full-time, they were part-time.
Yep.
Which had let's just say everything's really good right now.
Yeah.
It wasn't always good, just because expectations just weren't really aligned. So basically, you have me working full time, busting my butt, and then you have, two part-time folks who aren't helping as much. But the way that we structured things and the way that we didn't talk about things and did talk about things, it just kind of basically made this situation where it was just a lot of misaligned expectations. And I learned a lot in particular about, being a CEO just by handling those types of situations and realizing, okay, we need to make expectations really clear. We need to do this, we need to do that, and, kind of go from there.
And what is it, The Hard Thing About Hard Things? Have you read that book by any chance? It's
yeah, absolutely, man. That book should be read for basically every single founder should read it. And it gets a little kind of tedious because it's just a bunch. I mean, it's different. A lot of blog posts and examples, but at the very least, it gives you some type of empathy that you're not the only one, which is 100% true. Sometimes when you're in the thick of it, you're like, oh, I'm the only one who's gone through this. It's like, hell no. There's so many people who went through the exact same thing you did.
Yeah. And how have you gone about, and tell me, I guess, first off, a bit about what your team looks like. Are they based in the States? Are they based around the world? And how have you gone about, I guess, systematically, if there has been a systematic scaling of the team, how have you gone about that growth of them?
I don't know how systematic it was. I think that I can look back and basically come up with a system. But I think that essentially, we looked at it as, for me, the way I built the team in particular, and now it's how we build the team, is basically we have focused on, because it was just me in a room for 18 hours a day. Then all of a sudden, I ended up basically taking on, everything, and then solving one part of the business, and then hiring a senior person who's actually still with the company. I consider him basically a co-founder, but maybe not a name. And basically him taking on that part, and then me going and fixing the next part, and then hiring someone, and so on and so forth. And I think that that's helped a lot. But to be very frank, I don't know if we've cracked the hiring code, if that makes sense. I think a lot of, and I'm a first time founder, a lot of us, we hear all this advice of this is how you should hire. And all of that advice is 100% true, but we think we know better. And it's kind of this concept that, wisdom has to be learned. It can't be taught. Right. And I think that a lot of times we ended up, especially being bootstrapped, we were like, okay, I mean, they're not great, but they're going to solve the problem right now. And that's the worst thing to hire based on. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to them. It's bad for everyone. And that we've made that mistake too many times. And then also just kind of, the nature of our business is, the cyclical, the cash flow of it hasn't always been as kind of regular, because we had different deal terms and all that kind of stuff. We're all subscription now, but before that, it was really hard because you'd have these months where you had a ton of cash come in, but you can't hire based on that because you might not have the ton of cash the next month, right? And so it's one of those things where that's been something to figure out. And I guess to bring it to a head, I think hire really, really good people and really, really smart people, and pay them what they're worth, because that's the thing that's going to hold you up. Because they're going to, as long as they're taking giant swaths of the business off of your plate, that's exactly what you want. Or if you want to be a solopreneur, and be a digital nomad, if you will, then outsource as much as you can, and do what you can to avoid needing that particular person.
That's awesome. Awesome advice. With all that being said, what does your day look like nowadays? Like, is there a somewhat normal day, or certain things that you do every day?
So for me, I wish I had a normal day. That's what I'm working on. Yeah. So I can describe you at my best, and then I can describe reality. But I'll do both really quickly. So at my best, I'm using, I use Pomodoro techniques, and I'm putting it in, I have a planner that basically is a bullet planner that allows me to kind of plan everything, and kind of focus as much as possible. I try to put most of my meetings on 1 or 2 days, so the rest of the week can be open. And I'm pretty goal based, or I'm at my best when I'm very goal based. And so I really try to make sure that the teams that I'm running, as well as myself, are very numbers driven, meaning, hey, this is the number we care about. This is how many we need to get this week, or this is what we need to do this week. And then this is what we need to do for the quarter. I would say that that's true, that's consistent, but my weeks typically end up going to hell in a handbasket, just because meetings and all these other things. And I, for better or for worse, I basically just extend my days and get burnt out pretty quickly. But I go through this weird cycle where I get burnt out during the week, and I recover on the weekend, get burnt out in the week. And it, all the advice would say that's terrible, but it really works for me, at least right now. I don't know if it's going to work long term, just as, the team gets bigger and things like that. So yeah, I mean, that's the reality of it, I guess.
What do you see as the team and the business does continue to grow out of the things you do at the moment?
Say that one more time. Sorry.
As the team continues to grow and the business grows, what do you see changing with what you currently do? As in, is there particular aspects of, say, meetings or things like that that you'll get somebody else in to do? Because it's all well and good saying like, this is working for me right now. It might not for the future, but I don't know what I'll get rid of to do that. So what would that be?
So my goal this year is to get out of the weeds, essentially. And what that means for me is I want to basically completely be able to get hit by a bus and the business be perfectly fine. And we're mostly there. We haven't had a marketing team up until this point, and so I'm building that marketing team. And so I'm still trying to find the the leaders of that team who can run it really, really well, or at least in the way that I think it should be run. And once I have that figured out, I think we'll reach that. And then I really want to optimize my role against what I think it should be, which is, strategic partnerships, strategic initiatives within the company, and then making sure that there is alignment throughout the entire company. And so, I'm going to be the keeper of the goals, if you will, making sure that every single team is aligned in a way. And that'll obviously happen with their, team leads and managers and things like that, but also making sure, like, how do I unblock them? How do I make their lives easier? And almost become, that person who's, being the servant leader, which is how I think about it, which is, being the steward of the company and making sure that everyone is, taken care of as much as possible.
Yeah, nice. And so while we're on, I guess, your day, what would you say your best habit is, and what's your one that you're working, I won't say your worst, but the one that you're working on the hardest to improve, or things that you're trying to get out of your day?
That's so hard. I don't know if this is a cop out, but I think my best habit is, it's kind of a bad habit too. I will do anything that I need to do to support the team at any moment, at the expense of everything. So what that means, and that's where the bad side is. And what that means is like, for example, I was in London yesterday. I was doing a bunch of stuff. I was working both ends, basically working a London time, and I was working East Coast and Boston time, which is where we're based. I got off the plane at 7 p.m. last night local. I got on a train to New York at 9:30, got in at 3 because we had this breakfast that the team wanted me to do with one of our partners. Woke up and did that. Now I've had meetings all day in New York, and I mean, it's just one of those things where I think that you can choose a lifestyle business, and that would obviously, like, let's figure out how I can work 10 hours a week, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that's in my DNA. I think I would just die if that happened. But I do think that if you're in it, then you should be in it. So I've had conversations with my loved ones and basically said, listen, this is, at least as of right now, this is my life, right? Like, we can work around it. We can figure out how to make that work for you, but this is my life. But I think that's a really good habit, because I know a lot of CEOs and who don't have that, who basically, they feel like they're at the top of the pyramid, and that means they don't have to work, and that means that they're they almost look at the rest of the team as peasants, which is like the worst. So yeah, I think that's the good habit I have, and that was instilled through just good mentors and teachers growing up. In terms of bad habits, I think I basically don't take care of myself. I do, like, I'm starting to take time and things like that, but I don't go to the gym as much as I should. I don't, eat the right food as much as I should. And it's not that I'm doing like terribly with eating, but it's more just like it's not a priority because other things are a priority. And that's a pretty bad habit, because obviously if I did those things, I probably would be able to increase, my longevity throughout the week and that burnout. But it's one of those things where in practice, it's just not working, for better or for worse.
Yeah, the audio and the video don't necessarily match, but
I like that.
It seems to be the going theme. One area drops, but it's not necessarily in the detriment to other areas. Last couple of questions, just to wind it up, so you can do your 50 other meetings and books, like, and it sounds like you've had a look at stuff. What's I guess if we were to look at maybe a couple of books, what's the book that's had maybe the biggest influence on your life, and the best book that you've read in the last, say, 12 months?
Whoa, biggest influence on my life. That's hard, man. That's real hard. So what was the second one? Maybe
and the best one in the last, say, 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm a big Andy Grove fan. He was the former COO and CEO of Intel, and Andy Grove wrote 2 books that I think were just insanely good. The one was Only the Paranoid Survive, which is a lively title. And his other book was kind of a redux or a similar type of book called High Output Management. And both of those books, I think that this is how high output management starts, which is basically we have a lot of information about founders. We have a lot of information about entry level talent. We don't do anything for our mid level talent, which is basically what's going to make or break your entire company. And his lessons are very applicable to all stages, but it's one of those things where it really helped me understand how to be a middle manager, which is something that you do even if you're a CEO in a lot of cases. So I've read that. I read that probably about once a year. One of those books. They're pretty similar in a lot of what they talk about, at least the central messages. But the book that's had the most influence on me. That's so hard. It's because I do read quite often. I think it's interesting. The book. I don't know if this is the definitive answer, but I think an answer that will do is a book called Siddhartha, which is kind of like a popular book, but it kind of teaches a little bit about Buddha and kind of Eastern philosophy, and it's a narrative, so it's one of those things where it's kind of like a novel, if you will. And the reason that I think that book has had a lot of influences on me is because if you look at my life before that book, which was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, before that, like and this is a product of being a young, dumbass kid, but like frantic, high stress, but stress that I'm causing, etc. After that book gave me some perspective, started meditating, not regularly, but enough, started being a little bit more mindful. And I think I just read it at like the right time in my life that it just kind of really resonated with me. And someone's going to read this and be like, "Oh, this guy like suggesting that book," but it's really it did have a pretty meaningful impact on kind of how I think, which is
good. It's funny when you say that, because I mean, there's some books that I've read twice just because I guess either guests have talked about them or things like that, and there's some that I've read, say, at the start of my own, I guess, entrepreneurial journey or anything like that, and how it just went way over my head. It wasn't what I needed at that time. And a lot of people start off with, say, the 4-hour work week or the Rich Dad Poor Dads when they're younger, and then you go back and read, say, Rich Dad Poor Dad, you're like, all right, like whatever. That was that. But then at the time when you first read it, it blows your mind.
Totally.
So it's a very interesting one, and the meditation and mindfulness is. I actually gave a TEDx talk last year based off all the guests on the show on like the I guess the common underlying habit that they all have, and it was pretty much being more mindful and working on more meditation and journaling and things like that.
Totally.
Final question. 2 years time, I think we've kind of covered this a little bit as it is, but 2 years time, what are you doing and where are you doing it?
2 years time, what am I doing? Still running ProfitWell. I think we covered that in terms of the role. I think that's really what's going to happen. I'm probably going to be married at that point. I found the one. It's just now figuring out the details. I don't know. I think we'll also be probably expanding into our. We have 2 offices right now. We have one office in Boston, one in Rosario, Argentina. I think within 2 years we'll probably have either a West Coast office in the States and/or a European office in the EU or the UK, which is technically not the EU. Well, still the US. Not in 2 years. So, that'll be kind of what's going on. I feel like that's a lame answer though, because it's basically like, I'm just doing the same thing that I'm already doing.
At least, the shiny object syndrome isn't going too strong in the next couple of years. So, I look forward to seeing how that all pans out and touching base and keeping in contact. But I just want to thank you so much for your time and welcome you to the Youngpreneurs family. If people want to find out more about you or what you've been up to or ProfitWell itself, where can they go and what can they do?
Yeah, so the probably the best place is connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm not an open networker, but I pretty much accept every single, person who invites me unless it's clearly spam. But that's probably the best place. And then it's just Patrick Campbell on LinkedIn. But you're also welcome to email me at pc@profitwell.com. It takes me a little while sometimes to get back to you depending on your question, but it's, one of those things where I'll definitely will.
Cool. Well, we'll link all of that at passiveincomeyoung.com. Again, appreciate your time so much and wish you all the best for those next couple of years.
Awesome, brother. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Youngpreneurs Podcast. This was proudly brought to you by the Podcast Institute, the #1 training resource to take your business from chasing leads to leads chasing you, and from an absolute amateur to a full-blown authority. If you're looking to take your business to the next level, then a podcast is the obvious answer. You can get national and global exposure in a very fast time, and it's just exactly what I've done with this podcast. So if you want to find out more, get a checklist on how you can get started for under $60, and to find out more through a small training video that I've prepared for you all, then please check out passiveincomeyoung.com/podcast training.